Justice doesn't send a warning text, it just shows up right on time. Chosen One, that line alone should make the enemy uncomfortable because it points straight at the title and doesn't blink. While someone was busy smiling, plotting, and assuming they had control, the universe was already moving pieces behind the curtain. Not slowly, not emotionally, precisely. The moment they thought they were untouchable was the exact moment the clock started ticking against them. Think of it like this. Someone spends weeks building a trap in the dark, measuring every step, convinced the other person will walk straight into it. But they forget one thing. Traps don't care who built them. The moment the mechanism is armed, it only responds to weight. And 3 hours ago, the wrong foot stepped down. Hard. Here's the fact that should make your spine straighten. Studies in psychology show that people who obsess over controlling others almost always underestimate timing. They think power is about planning, when in reality, power is about alignment. When you're aligned, you don't chase justice. It arrives without asking you for permission. And when it does, it's fast, quiet, and deeply personal. Chosen One, before we go any further, pause with me for a second. If this message is hitting a little too close, if it feels like it's confirming things you already sensed but couldn't prove, take a moment to acknowledge that. And thank you, Chosen One, for being here. Don't forget to pay this message back by simply pressing like and subscribe, not for vanity, but to help spread this message to more souls who are standing at the edge of clarity. It's on all of us to pass forward what wakes people up. Thank you for being part of this mission. You're not random, you're part of a force. Now let's come back to what matters, because this isn't hype and it's not fantasy. This is about timing, consequence, and why the universe doesn't miss. Chosen One, open your eyes. Something shifted recently, and you felt it even if you didn't have words for it. Conversations started going quiet. Energy changed. Certain people suddenly disappeared or started acting strange. That wasn't coincidence. That was the moment the pressure flipped direction. The same pressure that was aimed at breaking you quietly rerouted itself. What you're hearing right now isn't a story, and it's not symbolic fluff. It's a pattern that repeats across lives, industries, families, and relationships. When someone spends too long trying to manipulate outcomes, instead of improving themselves, they eventually collide with their own actions. And when that collision happens, it's rarely loud. It's internal, sudden, disorienting. About 3 hours ago, someone connected to your struggle experienced a sharp unraveling, not necessarily dramatic on the outside, but intense on the inside. The kind of moment where the body feels off, the mind races, and panic arrives without a clear cause. Science calls it stress overload. Psychology calls it cognitive collapse. The universe calls it balance restoring itself. This wasn't random illness. This wasn't bad luck. This was the moment the weight of their own intent finally landed back on them. Everything they tried to send your way, fear, confusion, doubt, delay, circled back and demanded a receipt. Here's something interesting. Neuroscience confirms that sustained malicious intent puts the human nervous system into constant fight mode. Over time, the body can't tell the difference between an external threat and a self-created one. The stress turns inward. Sleep breaks. Breathing shifts. The heart stumbles. The body keeps score even when the mouth lies. They thought they were the hunter. Calm, clever, in control. But what they didn't understand is that you were never the prey. You were the mirror. Every move they made revealed more about them than about you. Every lie sharpened the blade that would eventually cut their own hand. Chosen One, you didn't need to fight back. That's the part that confuses people. You didn't expose them loudly. You didn't play dirty. You didn't retaliate. You stayed in your lane, kept your focus, and let time do what it always does. Time doesn't rush, but it never forgets. The universe doesn't protect by blocking every attack. Sometimes it protects by letting people overplay their hand, by letting them talk too much, push too far, assume too much, and when the balance tips, it doesn't ask for forgiveness. If you're wondering why this is happening now, it's because cycles don't close until lessons are clear. You reached a point where you stopped questioning your worth. You stopped shrinking to keep others comfortable. That internal shift is louder than any argument. Once that happened, the situation couldn't continue the same way. And here's the part that really matters. This justice wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about removal. Removing influence, removing access, removing the false sense of control someone had over your path. That's why it feels sudden. That's why it feels final. Chosen one, you were being observed, not to be trapped, but to be tested. To see if you would break, beg, or become bitter. Instead, you became still. And stillness is dangerous to anyone who thrives on chaos. What's unfolding now is the universe correcting an imbalance, quietly, firmly, without drama. And while they're busy trying to understand what went wrong, you're being moved forward without resistance. So, chosen one, before we go any deeper, pause right here with me. If you're still listening, it's not by accident. Messages like this don't hold random people. They hold the ones who already felt the shift before the words confirmed it. And if this title pulled you in, it's because part of you already knew something had flipped, that justice didn't just move, it landed. So do this for yourself. Let the algorithm know this message matters. Press like, subscribe, whatever button keeps this conversation alive, not for numbers, but so it reaches the others who are standing right where you once stood. Drop a simple comment below, just the number 777, not as magic, not as superstition, but as a signal that you're locked in and paying attention. It tells the universe, and honestly your own mind, that you're ready to see things clearly instead of guessing in the dark. And if you feel it, if you really feel the weight and clarity of what's being shared here, consider supporting the work behind it. These messages don't appear out of thin air. Even the smallest support keeps this mission moving and helps bring truth to people who need it most. Now take a breath, chosen one, because from here on, we're breaking this down step by step. And if you're truly meant to hear this, you'll feel the pull to stay until the very end. Let's begin. Number 1. The trap she set in the dark snapped back on her face. The funniest part about a hidden plot is that it always thinks it's invisible, right until it detonates. Chosen one, this is where things stop being vague and start getting uncomfortable for the enemy, because nothing that was done behind your back stayed hidden. Not the whispers, not the lies dressed up as concern, not the quiet sabotage, not the fake smiles with sharp intentions underneath. Every move they thought was clever got logged, not by people, by reality itself. The universe doesn't need witnesses, it needs patterns, and patterns never lie. Here's the truth they didn't account for. You don't have to hear a lie for it to leave residue. The environment remembers energy. Psychology confirms this. Sustained malicious intent creates stress loops, not just in the target, but in the sender. The more someone plots, the heavier their own system becomes. Sleep fractures, focus breaks, anxiety spikes. They start leaking tells. That's why secrecy always fails. The body can't keep secrets forever. She moved in silence, convinced that darkness equals safety. that if nobody saw her hands, the damage wouldn't trace back. But darkness doesn't protect intent. It magnifies it. It removes accountability until pressure builds so high that the release becomes violent. That's what just happened. The very space she thought would hide her ended up spotlighting her. Think of it like this. Someone pours poison into a river upstream, assuming the current will carry it away. But rivers loop, currents circle, and eventually that water always comes back around. Not as revenge, as chemistry, cause and effect, with zero emotion attached. At this point, you might be asking yourself, why now? That question matters, because timing is everything. This didn't happen randomly. It happened because the plot reached critical mass. Lies stacked on lies, moves piled on moves, and eventually weight triggers collapse. The universe doesn't rush justice. It waits until there's no escape route left. What she released wasn't mystical. It was psychological warfare, manipulation, projection, quiet attempts to destabilize you so she could feel stable. But here's the part people hate hearing. You were never weak enough for it to work. You felt the pressure, sure, confusion, exhaustion, moments of self-doubt. That doesn't mean it succeeded. It means it bounced. And when intent bounces, it doesn't disappear. It returns to sender with interest. That's why the unraveling felt sudden. One moment she thought she was ahead. The next, her system couldn't hold itself together, breathing off, thoughts racing, body reacting without permission. That's not bad luck. That's overload. When someone lives too long in deception, their nervous system stays in constant threat mode. Eventually, it panics without a visible threat, because the threat was internal all along. You might also be wondering, did I cause this? No. And that question proves why this worked in your favor. You didn't push. You didn't strike back. You didn't sink into obsession. You stayed focused on survival, growth, and getting through the day. That restraint matters. It keeps your hands clean while the universe does the accounting. Here's a hard pill. People who plot against you aren't strong, they're terrified. Confident people build, insecure people interfere, and interference always leaves fingerprints. She thought she was playing chess while you were playing life. She planned moves, you evolved. That gap is lethal. There was a warning phase. There always is. Subtle discomfort, small signs, moments where she could have stopped. But obsession makes people ignore exits. The more someone convinces themselves they're right, the less they listen. And once that line is crossed, the outcome locks in. This is why justice feels cold. No speeches, no dramatic confrontations, just consequences showing up unannounced. One moment they're fine, the next everything feels off. The body rebels, the mind scrambles, control evaporates, and suddenly they're asking, how did this happen? The answer is simple. It didn't just happen, it accumulated. Chosen one, understand this clearly. You were not spared because you're lucky. You were spared because you didn't match the frequency of destruction. You didn't become what tried to break you. That matters more than any defense. And here's the part that should straighten your posture. This wasn't the end. This was the interception, the point where the trajectory changed. The trap never reached you because it folded inward first. That's why things feel lighter now, quieter, less resistance. The noise stopped because the source imploded. If you're feeling calm instead of excited, that's another confirmation. Real justice doesn't hype you up. It settles you. It removes the background tension you got used to carrying. You don't celebrate, you breathe. Let this be motivation, not distraction. You don't gloat. You don't explain. You don't reopen doors that close themselves. You move forward cleaner, clearer, and sharper. Because while she's busy dealing with the fallout of her own actions, you're being repositioned without obstacles. The plot failed, not because you fought it, but because it was never built on truth, and anything built on lies collapses under its own weight. Number 2. She didn't fall all at once. She walked into it smiling. People don't end up in darkness by accident. They arrive there one excuse at a time. Chosen one, this part matters because enemies love to pretend their collapse was sudden. A bad day, bad luck, wrong place, wrong time. That story is comforting, but it's fake. What happened to her did not start with consequences. It started with permission. Permission she gave herself to cross lines quietly, to justify thoughts she should have shut down, to nurture resentment instead of starving it. This descent never begins loudly. It begins in places no one applauds. Private thoughts, silent comparisons, the moment jealousy stops being a feeling and starts becoming a plan. Psychology backs this up. When envy is left unchecked, it rewires perception. People stop seeing others as human and start seeing them as obstacles. That's when empathy shuts down and obsession clocks in for a full-time shift. Imagine this. Someone stands at the top of a staircase in the dark. The first step down feels harmless, then another, then another. Each step feels small enough to justify. No alarms, no collapse. But gravity doesn't care how confident you feel. Eventually, the bottom shows up. Her soul didn't crack overnight. It bent, thought by thought, choice by choice. She told herself stories to stay comfortable, that she was right, that she was wronged, that you deserved whatever came your way. And the more she repeated those lies, the easier they felt. That's how darkness works. It doesn't scream. It whispers until it sounds like your own voice. You might be wondering, why me? That question always shows up here, because when someone is already unstable, they don't target random people. They target mirrors. They target those who highlight their own stagnation just by existing. Your growth, your calm, your refusal to implode triggered something she didn't want to face. Here's a brutal truth. Hatred feels powerful to people who feel powerless. It gives them direction, a target, something to blame instead of looking inward. That's why she mistook hatred for strength. It gave her the illusion of control without requiring growth. Imagine this metaphor. A person drinks salt water thinking it will cure thirst. At first, it feels like relief, but every sip dehydrates them further. That's resentment. It feels validating at first, but it slowly destroys the system consuming it. She didn't just complain, she sought reinforcement. She went looking for places, people, and ideas that would validate her worst impulses. Environments matter. When someone steps into spaces built on desperation, bitterness, and shortcuts, those spaces don't heal them. They amplify what's already broken. And this is where the enemy really miscalculated. Speaking your name with intention isn't power, it's exposure. When someone focuses sustained negative intent on another person, they tether themselves energetically and psychologically. Studies show that fixation increases stress hormones, paranoia, and emotional volatility. The target often feels lighter over time. The sender feels heavier. Imagine this. Someone ties a rope around your waist, intending to pull you down. But they don't realize the rope is anchored to their own body. Every pull drags them closer to the edge, too. She thought she was erasing you. Instead, she was carving her own name deeper into the consequences list. The universe doesn't respond to hatred the way movies portray. It doesn't explode. It compresses. It waits. It allows people to keep choosing until the math is undeniable. You may be asking, could she have stopped? Yes, many times. That's the uncomfortable part. There were moments where she felt the warning signs: fatigue, anxiety, sudden unease. the sense that something was off. Those weren't attacks, those were exits. She ignored them because obsession makes people feel special. Here's another quote that cuts clean. When someone chooses darkness long enough, they stop noticing the light isn't gone, they just turned their back to it. This wasn't about you being punished or tested, it was about alignment. You stayed focused on building, healing, surviving, evolving. She stayed focused on interference. Those paths don't run parallel forever. Eventually, they split hard. Imagine a train switching tracks. One track leads forward, steady, boring, disciplined. The other leads toward a cliff, fast, dramatic, emotional. Both feel valid at first. Only one ends well. She believed secrecy would shield her, that as long as things happened quietly, nothing would rebound. But secrecy doesn't erase intent. It concentrates it. The longer someone lives a double internal life, the louder the internal pressure becomes. That's why collapses feel sudden. They aren't sudden, they're delayed. You might also wonder, why do I feel calm instead of angry? Because anger belongs to people who still need validation. Calm belongs to people who've outgrown the battlefield. You don't need revenge when the system corrected itself. Here's a fact people hate. The universe doesn't punish people for being bad. It responds to imbalance. When someone pours too much into destruction, manipulation, and control, they tip their own scale. The correction is automatic. Another metaphor. Imagine overloading a power grid. Lights don't flicker right away. Everything seems fine, until suddenly everything shuts down at once. That's what happened here. Chosen one, understand this clearly. You were not protected because you were louder. You were protected because you didn't abandon yourself. You didn't sink to match her depth. You didn't let bitterness rewrite your character. This section exists to answer the quiet fear some of you have. What if she tries again? That fear comes from not realizing the cost she already paid. People rarely repeat actions that almost destroyed them. And if they do, the system corrects faster the second time. She didn't lose because you attacked her. She lost because she kept choosing the wrong fuel. Hatred burns fast and leaves nothing but ash. Discipline burns slow and builds steel. Let this sink in. While she was descending step by step, convincing herself she was gaining power, you were ascending without spectacle. No shortcuts, no secret plots, just quiet alignment. And when those two paths finally crossed, one collapsed inward, the other kept moving. That's not luck, that's structure. Number 3. The knife she raised turned around and asked who she really was. The moment you use a weapon to control someone, it stops being a weapon and starts being a mirror. Chosen one, this is where her illusion finally collapsed. She wasn't handed power, she was handed a test, a choice wrapped in temptation. And like most people who crave control, she ignored the warning because warnings don't flatter the ego, they threaten it. That vial, that tool, that so-called advantage she clutched so tightly wasn't some magical shortcut. It was a feedback loop, a mirror disguised as leverage. Tools don't just act, they amplify the intent of the person holding them. And when the intent is rotten, amplification becomes exposure. Imagine this. Someone turns up the volume on a microphone thinking it will make their voice stronger. But the room is full of static. The louder they go, the worse it sounds. That's what happened here. She thought escalation meant elevation. In reality, it just made her inner noise impossible to ignore. Here's a fact people hate admitting. Control tactics don't strengthen the user, they drain them. Psychology shows that people obsessed with manipulating outcomes experience faster emotional burnout, paranoia, and loss of self-trust. The mind starts watching itself. The body stays tense. Sleep disappears. Power becomes a performance instead of a state. She believed the tool would lift her above you. Instead, it forced her to stare at herself without filters. Every time she tried to aim it outward, it reflected something back she didn't want to see. Fear, envy, emptiness. The very things she was running from. You might be wondering, why didn't it touch me? Because mirrors don't harm what isn't aligned with them. You weren't vibrating with the same intent. You weren't reaching for control. You were focused on survival, growth, and staying sane. That difference matters more than any defense. Another way to see it. Imagine pouring gasoline on a fire you think belongs to someone else, only to realize the fire is inside your own house. You didn't need to light the match. She did that herself. Here's the gut punch she never expected. Tools don't choose sides. The universe doesn't either. It simply responds to coherence. When someone tries to bend reality, instead of aligning with it, reality bends them back. This is why the consumption felt slow at first, then sudden, then overwhelming. Mirrors don't shatter instantly. They crack quietly until one day the reflection is all you can see. Chosen one, take this as confirmation. You weren't protected by luck. You were protected by not becoming what tried to use you. And that restraint turned her weapon into her confession. Number 4. Reality doesn't negotiate. It collects. You don't get punished for what you do. You get shaped by it. Chosen one, this is where fantasy ends and mechanics begin. There are rules baked into reality that don't care about bitterness, intention, or how justified someone feels. You don't get to bargain with outcomes just because you're emotional. You don't get exceptions because you feel wronged. Systems don't bend, they respond. Here's the part people avoid. Consequences aren't dramatic. They're accurate. What someone invests energy into, especially in private, builds momentum. Thoughts repeated become habits. Habits harden into patterns. Patterns turn into environments, and environments eventually turn inward. That's not morality. That's physics of behavior. Imagine planting thorns and being shocked when your hands bleed every time you reach down. That's what happened here. She assumed manipulation meant mastery. She thought she could stir forces she didn't understand and step away untouched. But reality doesn't work like a remote control. It works like a boomerang. Another way to see it. Imagine shaking a soda can violently, then calmly setting it down and pretending nothing happened. The explosion doesn't happen immediately. It waits. Pressure builds quietly. And when it finally releases, it looks sudden to everyone who ignored the shaking. She believed she could influence outcomes without being affected by them. That belief alone sealed the result. The moment someone tries to bend the system instead of aligning with it, the stress reroutes internally. Anxiety spikes. Focus collapses. The body starts malfunctioning under invisible pressure. Here's a fact backed by psychology. Chronic deception and manipulation elevate cortisol levels long-term. That hormone eats away at clarity, sleep, digestion, and emotional regulation. In simple terms, the chaos she aimed outward began assembling inside her first. You might be asking, why does it feel so final? Because thresholds exist. Once enough weight is added, reversal becomes impossible, not because the universe is cruel, but because systems protect balance, not comfort. Another quote to lock this in: reality doesn't seek revenge, it restores equilibrium. Chosen one, notice what didn't happen. You didn't have to expose her. You didn't have to confront her. You didn't have to explain your innocence. That's how you know this wasn't personal. It was structural. Imagine a bridge overloaded past capacity. It doesn't collapse because it hates the traffic. It collapses because the math demands it. That's the truth here. What she sent out didn't miss you. It rerouted, and once rerouted, it couldn't be called back. This isn't a warning story. It's confirmation. You didn't lose control. You never needed it. The system already handled what never belonged in your hands. And once reality collects, it doesn't issue refunds. Number 5. The snapback moment they never saw coming. The most dangerous moment for a trap is when the target never even notices it existed. Chosen one, this is the exact point where the story flips, and it flips quietly. You didn't sense danger. You weren't bracing for impact. You were simply moving forward, mind on your own life, unaware that something had been aimed in your direction. That's important, because protection works best when you don't have to perform for it. The setup looked ordinary on the surface, nothing dramatic, no alarms, no warning signs screaming at you to react. And that's why it failed. The universe had already marked the moment before the move was even released. Not emotionally, mechanically. Timing had already been locked. Here's what people misunderstand. Reversals don't happen because someone deserves saving. They happen because alignment cancels interference. You weren't vibrating at the same frequency as the attack. You weren't feeding fear. You weren't entertaining obsession. So when the plan left her hands, it had nowhere to land. Imagine throwing a punch in a dream and hitting nothing but air, then losing balance and falling on your own face. That's what happened here. Force without grounding always snaps back. Another way to see it. Think of trying to pour poison into a sealed container. The liquid doesn't disappear. It spills back over the hands holding it. The container didn't fight. It was simply closed. You might be wondering, why did it reverse instead of just disappearing? Because energy doesn't vanish. It redirects. Psychology shows that suppressed aggression often rebounds inward as anxiety, panic, and physical stress. What was aimed outward began detonating internally instead. Here's a clean truth. You didn't neutralize anything. You didn't block anything. You didn't even know you were being targeted. That's what makes this hit harder. The universe handled it without needing your awareness. That's not luck. That's insulation. Another quote to let this sink in. You don't win by swinging back. You win by being untouchable. The moment she released her plan was the same moment resistance appeared. Not as confrontation, as containment. A hard stop she couldn't see or override. The pressure had to go somewhere, and it wasn't allowed near you. If you're asking yourself, why do I feel lighter now? That's your answer. The background interference cut off. The noise source shut down. Calm returned, not because the world changed, but because access was revoked. The reversal wasn't dramatic. It was final, and the scariest part for the enemy is this. You kept walking forward, never knowing how close they thought they came. That's real protection. Number 6. When the mask slipped, everything under it panicked. Confidence borrowed from deception always expires without notice. Chosen one, this is the phase nobody glamorizes because it's ugly, disorienting, and impossible to hide. This is where her borrowed strength evaporated, not slowly, not gracefully. One day she felt in control, sharp, ahead of the game. The next, fear crawled in and refused to leave. That's what happens when power isn't real. It can't survive pressure. Here's the truth. When someone builds their sense of strength on manipulation, it only works as long as the environment cooperates. The moment reality pushes back, even slightly, everything collapses at once. The confidence wasn't confidence. It was tension, and tension always snaps. Imagine holding a heavy weight with locked arms, pretending it's easy. For a while, it works. People even believe you. Then the muscles shake. Then they give out. And suddenly, everyone sees the strain you are hiding. That's exactly what happened here. Fear didn't just show up. It replaced her entire operating system. Decisions got sloppy. Reactions got emotional. Stories stopped lining up. Psychology calls this cognitive dissonance, when someone can't reconcile who they think they are with what's actually happening. The mind fractures under the stress. Confusion becomes permanent. You might be wondering, why did she start blaming everyone? Because blame is the last refuge of a collapsing identity. Taking responsibility would mean admitting the foundation was rotten. That's too painful for most people. So they scatter the guilt, hoping it sticks somewhere else. Another metaphor. Imagine a cracked dam under rising water. Instead of fixing the crack, the operator yells at the river. That's blame, loud, pointless, and useless against pressure. Here's a hard fact. Studies show that when people lose perceived control, their behavior becomes more erratic, defensive, and self-exposing. They talk too much, react too fast, make mistakes they never would have made before. Exposure isn't forced, it leaks. She never realized the real line she crossed wasn't about you. It was about order, about trying to bend reality to feed ego instead of adjusting herself. Systems don't tolerate that long term, not out of morality, out of necessity. Here's the gut punch quote to lock this in. You can disrespect reality for a while, you just can't outrun the invoice. Chosen one, notice something important. You didn't need to expose her. Her behavior did that on its own. When pressure rises, truth floats. Always. This collapse wasn't loud revenge. It was quiet revelation. And once someone is exposed to themselves, there's no way back to pretending. Number 7. They didn't come for you by accident. You messed with their lies just by existing. Nothing triggers insecure people faster than someone who's calm without permission. Chosen one, let's clear this up cleanly, because this question always shows up right here. Why you? Why were you singled out when you were just trying to live your life, mind your business, and stay sane? The answer isn't mystical or flattering. It's structural. Your presence disrupts unstable systems. You don't have to be loud. You don't have to flex. You don't even have to succeed publicly. Your peace alone is offensive to people who survive on chaos. Your clarity exposes confusion without saying a word. Your consistency highlights their instability. That contrast feels like an attack to someone who's already cracked inside. Imagine this, a room full of smoke, everyone coughing, pretending it's normal. Then someone opens a window. The smoke doesn't blame the fire, it blames the window. That's you. You didn't create the mess, you just let air in. Here's a fact psychology backs hard. People with unresolved internal conflict often externalize blame onto the nearest stable target, not the strongest, the clearest, because clarity feels like judgment when you're hiding from yourself. You might ask, did I provoke this? No, you revealed it, and those are very different things. You didn't threaten her life. You threatened her narrative, and narratives are everything to people who can't face reality. Another metaphor. Imagine a counterfeit bill passing through a crowd unnoticed until it hits a scanner. The scanner didn't attack the bill. It just told the truth. And truth ends games fast. Every plan aimed at you was already flawed because it assumed you were the problem. You weren't. The imbalance was internal. That's why none of it stuck. The universe doesn't support misaligned intent. It logs it. measures it, then quietly redirects it back where it belongs. Here's the quote that settles this. You don't get targeted for being weak. You get targeted for being undeniable. You weren't walking alone through this, even when it felt isolating, not because someone swooped in dramatically, but because the system itself favors coherence. When you stay grounded, honest and forward-moving, interference has nowhere to attach. You didn't dodge the shadow by fighting it. You outgrew the room it needed to survive. And here's the final truth they hate. No amount of plotting outmaneuvers alignment. No shadow outpaces structure. When someone moves against reality itself, reality doesn't argue. It simply removes their access to you. Number 8. Truth didn't kick the door in. It rose and left her exposed. This wasn't payback. It was the truth finally getting tired of hiding. Chosen one, this moment right here is where people misunderstand what they're witnessing. They want to call it revenge because revenge feels emotional, loud, and human. But this wasn't that. This was truth surfacing on its own schedule. No anger, no chasing, no scorekeeping, just reality lifting the curtain and letting things be seen exactly as they are. Nothing was taken from her. Nothing was stolen. She drank from what she filled herself. The cup didn't show your downfall because your downfall was never in it. What it reflected back was her own heart, unfiltered, unprotected, and undeniable. And once someone is forced to face themselves without distortion, the collapse happens naturally. Imagine this. A dirty window that's been fogged up for years suddenly gets wiped clean. The view outside didn't change. The mess was always on the glass. That's what truth does. It doesn't create damage. It reveals where it already existed. Here's a fact people don't like. Truth doesn't need allies. It doesn't need timing approval. It rises when the internal pressure becomes too heavy to contain. Psychology shows that people living double lives eventually experience exposure through stress behaviors, slips, contradictions, emotional leaks. Truth doesn't attack. It leaks out of cracks. You might be wondering, why does it feel like so many things collapsed around her at once? Because when one lie falls, it pulls others down with it. Deception is a stack, not a single brick. Once the base gives, the rest follows fast. Another metaphor. Imagine a stage prop holding up an entire set. It looks solid until someone leans on it. Then everything caves in at once. That's what happened. Not because you pushed, because it was hollow. Here's a quote to lock this in. Truth doesn't chase people down. It waits until there's nowhere left to run. Chosen one, notice where you were during all of this. Still standing, still moving, still untouched. Not because you were special in a dramatic way, but because you weren't aligned with the collapse. Structures don't fall on people who aren't standing under them. Others may stumble, others may fall apart. That's not your burden to carry. What matters is this. The truth rose, justice revealed itself quietly, and none of it came near you. That's not coincidence. That's positioning. Number 9. She didn't betray you. She betrayed her own inner alarm. The most expensive mistake is ignoring the voice that told you to stop. Chosen one, this is where the story cuts deeper than surface drama. Her collapse wasn't caused by enemies, rivals, or bad luck. It wasn't even caused by you. It was caused by something far more dangerous. Repeatedly ignoring that quiet inner signal that says, "This isn't right. Turn back now." Everyone gets that signal. Not everyone listens. Conviction isn't loud. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't shame. It nudges. And every time someone ignores it, they lose a little bit of internal alignment. Over time, that loss compounds. The mind learns how to justify. The heart learns how to numb. And eventually, the person can't tell the difference between instinct and impulse anymore. Here's a hard truth. Hatred doesn't travel outward forever. It loops. It always finds its way back to the source because it needs a host to survive. Psychology confirms this. Sustained hostility increases stress, weakens emotional regulation, and collapses self-trust. Poison doesn't disappear when you throw it. It seeps into the one holding the container. Imagine this. Someone pours acid, hoping it will eat through someone else's floor, but the container is cracked. The acid doesn't wait. It eats through the hands first. That's what happened here. She didn't fall because the universe turned against her. The universe stayed neutral. It simply stopped shielding someone who kept violating their own internal boundaries. Protection doesn't stick to people who abandon themselves. Alignment does. You might be wondering, why did her actions feel so personal toward me? Because when someone ignores their own conviction long enough, they look for external targets to justify the internal damage. You became a symbol, not the cause. Symbols are easier to attack than the truth. Another metaphor. Imagine a car with a flashing warning light on the dashboard. Instead of fixing the engine, the driver covers the light with tape and keeps driving faster. The breakdown isn't sudden, it's guaranteed. Here's the quote that seals this section. Betraying others is optional. Betraying yourself always collects. She aimed at what was stable, grounded, and insulated, not because it was weak, but because it reminded her of what she refused to become. That attempt didn't harm you. It exposed the fracture inside her. Chosen one, let this land clearly. You weren't protected because someone fought for you. You were protected because you stayed aligned. And alignment is the one thing sabotage can't touch. She unraveled because she walked away from her own warning system. You stayed intact because you listened to yours. Number 10. This was never about her collapse. It was about your calibration. What you survive isn't random, it's training. Chosen one, this moment isn't here for entertainment or validation, it's instructional. What you witnessed wasn't just someone else falling apart. It was you being shaped in real time. Pressure reveals, but it also forges. And this chapter exists to sharpen your awareness, not inflate your ego. Here's the quiet truth. Nothing inside you is neutral. Every thought you entertain feeds something. Every word you repeat builds momentum in one direction or another. This isn't about being perfect. It's about being intentional. People who drift mentally end up living inside outcomes they never chose. Imagine this. You plant seeds every day, even when you don't mean to. Some seeds grow gardens, others grow weeds. Ignoring the soil doesn't stop growth. It just guarantees chaos. That's why inner discipline matters more than outer defense. You might be asking, so what am I supposed to do with this? Not celebrate, not fear it. Learn from it. Let it refine how you move, how you speak, how you react when no one's watching. Power isn't loud, it's precise. Here's a fact that grounds this. Studies show that people who practice deliberate thought control, choosing responses instead of reacting, experience higher emotional stability and long-term success. In simple terms, guarding your inner world makes you harder to derail. Another metaphor. Think of your mind like a control room. Every unchecked thought is a button pressed without permission. Eventually, systems overload. Calm people aren't calm by accident. They manage the panel. This lesson isn't telling you to shrink, it's telling you to move clean. Walk gently, not because you're weak, but because unnecessary force attracts unnecessary resistance. Speak deliberately, because words don't just communicate, they condition. Guard your inner world, because once it's stable, nothing external can hijack it. Here's the quote that locks this in. You don't rise by watching others fall. You rise by refusing to fall the same way. Chosen one, this was your reminder. Stay aware, stay grounded, build intentionally, because what's coming next isn't about survival anymore. It's about direction. Number 11. The machine that breeds envy and chews people up for believing it. They didn't fail because they weren't enough. They failed because they believed the wrong scoreboard. Chosen one, this part matters because the same environment that twisted her thinking still exists around you right now. Nothing changed out there. The noise is the same. The comparisons are louder than ever. The world still hands out fake scorecards and tells people their worth is based on applause, speed, beauty, money, or visibility. That machine doesn't just distract people, it feeds on them. She didn't wake up hateful, she was trained into it. Comparison rewired her mind. Competition replaced curiosity. False measures of success became the ruler she used to judge herself and everyone else. And when you live like that, someone else's peace feels like an insult. Imagine this. You're running on a treadmill while watching someone else walk calmly past you on solid ground. Instead of stepping off, you start running harder. That's envy, exhaustion mixed with resentment. Here's a fact that cuts clean. Studies show that constant comparison increases anxiety, reduces self-worth, and fuels hostility. The more people measure themselves against others, the less stable they become internally. Eventually, they don't want to improve, they want to interrupt. You might be asking, why didn't I fall into that? Because alignment beats comparison every time. You weren't trying to impress the room. You were trying to understand yourself. That single difference kept you out of the trap. Another metaphor. Imagine building a house using someone else's blueprint without knowing the land. It looks good on paper. Then the foundation cracks. That's borrowed identity. It never holds. She chased approval instead of alignment, and approval is a moving target. It never settles. It always demands more. Alignment, on the other hand, stabilizes. It doesn't care who's watching. Here's the quote to lock this lesson in. When you stop auditioning for the world, you stop losing to it. Chosen one, let this ground you. You are not here to perform. You are not here to compete for oxygen. You're here to move in your own lane with clarity and restraint. Your worth isn't up for debate, comparison, or negotiation. The world will keep feeding envy. That's its business model. Yours is alignment. And alignment makes you untouchable by systems designed to keep people insecure. Stay off the treadmill. Walk your ground. Number 12. Stay awake. This is where most people fall asleep again. You don't lose when others attack you. You lose when you forget who you are. Chosen one. This is the final tightening of the lens. This isn't hype, and it's not poetry. It's instruction. You are not a random chain of accidents, bad days, and lucky escapes. You are a sequence, a pattern, a story still being written in real time by the choices you make when no one is watching. Walking awake means you stop drifting. You stop reacting on autopilot. You stop letting other people's bitterness decide your next move. Most people don't collapse because of enemies. They collapse because they fall asleep inside their own lives. Here's the choice in front of you, and it's simpler than people want to admit. You can choose clarity over resentment, calm over pride, alignment over reaction. Every time you choose reaction, you hand control away. Every time you choose alignment, you take it back quietly. Imagine this. Two people get hit with the same pressure. One thrashes, panics, and burns energy trying to prove something. The other adjusts posture, breathes, and keeps moving. Same storm, different outcome. Awareness is the difference. You might be thinking, what if I mess up? You will. Awareness doesn't mean perfection, it means correction. It means catching yourself before resentment hardens, before pride blinds, before anger hijacks the wheel. Here's a fact that grounds this. Neuroscience shows that people who practice conscious response instead of reflexive reaction rewire their brains toward long-term stability. In simple terms, staying awake makes you harder to knock off course. Another metaphor. Imagine driving at night with headlights on versus off. The road doesn't change. Your ability to navigate does. Awareness doesn't remove obstacles. It keeps you from crashing into them. Here's the quote that seals this section. Protection isn't about being flawless. It's about staying aligned. Nothing aimed at you can prosper when it has nowhere to land. Not because you're untouchable, but because you're grounded. Interference needs chaos to stick. When you move clean, it slides right off. Chosen one, your story isn't finished. It's unfolding. Pages are still being written through your decisions, your restraint, your discipline, and your refusal to become what tried to break you. Stay awake, stay aligned, and keep moving forward with intention.